are starting or continuing on, I guess, in I Am That by Shree Nisargadatta Maharaj. And it's a study of Jnana Yoga, the path of knowledge, if you haven't been tuning in. And the path of knowledge is in search of who are we? What are we? What is the nature of our experience as living, as living? What does it mean to be alive? How does that happen? How does it work? How does it all come together? And so really this path of knowledge is trying to see things as they are, not trying to find something new, but just trying to understand what this is, what this moment is. And so it's quite challenging because it doesn't take us long in our practice even to get to a place beyond words where you really just can't quite describe. And even if you could describe, it wouldn't be an adequate description of that peace, of that stillness that we can experience or see. And so in their quest for it last week, he was asking, well, could you call this pure? What becomes of consciousness and God? And they said, they become pure being, just isness. And he says, is that the same as the great expanse,
Maharaj, can I interrupt to say which section is it that we are on?
We are on the section called Reality Lies in Objectivity, 19.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. And we're on the question, how can I see the world as God? But coming up to that last week, he was saying, well, this pure being, can that be called the Paramakash? And Maharaj he answers kind of disinterestedly, which I really liked. He says, well, you can call it so. He says, words don't matter at that level because they don't reach it. They turn back in utter negation. So that words cannot, when you're talking about God at that level, the only reason we can talk about God at this level is because of our profound ignorance. There's lots of words to throw around, but as that fog clears and we begin to see things, a lot of stuff happens toward that time, actually. But certainly one of them is we run out of words to describe because we're not talking about something within time anymore because we've gone beyond the mind. And without time, we don't have any space and causation. So we get even further away from words. And so we can't put anything together because there's no longer nouns and objects and relationships. It's all just isness, a singularity. So the questioner lowers the level of his questions real quick. He says, well, how can I see the world as God? What does it mean to see the world as God? Maharaj, it is like entering a dark room. You see nothing. You may touch, but you do not see. No colors, no outlines. The window opens and the room is flooded with light. Colors and shapes come into being. The window is the giver of light, but not the source of it. The sun is the source. Similarly, matter is like the dark room. Consciousness is like the window, flooding matter with sensation and perceptions. And the supreme is the sun, the source of both matter and of light. The window may be closed or open. The sun shines all the time. It makes all the difference to the room, but none to the sun. Yet all this is secondary to the tiny little thing, which is the I am. Without the I am, there is nothing. All knowledge is about the I am. False ideas about this I am lead to bondage. Right knowledge leads to freedom and to happiness. What a marvelous metaphor or drawing here he's put together. So you enter a dark room. It's completely dark. There's nothing there. No colors, no outlines. The window opens and the room is flooded with light. So colors and shapes come into being. So the window is the giver of light, but not the source. The sun is the source. Matter is like the dark room. So consciousness is the window that allows this light of awareness, which is the source, to flood in. So the light of awareness floods through the window of consciousness and makes us aware of all of the objects, colors, and boundaries that we break into distinct objects. All of these sensations and perceptions. And the supreme is the sun, that sense of I am, that sense of being, Satchitananda and beyond. Without I am, there is nothing, but all knowledge is about I am. Interesting. So you see, this should open a real window of potential familiarity to you, to think that all of the studies, you're not studying God, you're not studying an object or a thing in the world, you're studying your own I am. Everything written in the Vedas, everything written in all of the scriptures of the world are about your sense of I am, referred to as God or the divine. That your sense of I am is a singularity. It's the same one I'm using. It's the same one every one of us is using. We're all using the same I am to get our existence, to get our intelligence, and to get our bliss, our joy, our love. So all of that is coming from the same source, the same singularity. And that is where the one without a second is known. It can't be known. There's no one to know it, but it's self-knowing there.
So Maharaj, if I, as I read this, am I right in thinking that the window, the way he's saying it, is perhaps the birth, the birth of the consciousness, the I am? You know how he separates between consciousness and awareness, where the consciousness is with objects. So the supreme, as the sun, is always there. The awareness is always there. But when the window opens, when birth happens, then the objects come into play, and the I am then takes place. So the sun is shining, and yet all this is secondary to the tiny little thing which is I am. So would that be kind of correct or not?
Yeah, you could go a ways with that. You could go a number of ways with that. But yes, that could work. The awareness comes through the window, and then there are objects. It's reflecting off of all the boundaries in the room. So there's objects. When you've got objects in awareness, you have consciousness. So it's consciousness that's illuminating the room. And you could see that as birth, be taking on a body that now gives you perception, that would then create all the objects and whatnot. So it'd be a manifestation, but you could also keep it at the level of mind. We've never actually been born. And so there's this individuation is happening in mind only. So we imagine a body for ourselves. We create a body for ourselves and inhabit that perspective like we do in a dream. And then we enter into the dream through that body, through that perceived body, which really is just a thought in itself. And then we enter into consciousness, into this experience of the world and everything, caused by egoism, caused by the attachment of this universal seer, the universal I am, attaching to a set of attributes that make it a particular I am, so that my I am becomes Swami C instead of the universal I am that it was before it imagined a body for itself. And so it has imagined many bodies for itself, but it itself still remains singular, still I am. So it is true, we are all the deluded scum powered by the beloved battery, the I am. But not only manifesting scum, we manifest a few good things every now and then, a few happy things.
Thank you.
All right, surely. So marvelous. The questioner goes on, is this I am and there is the same? So is I am and there is, are they the same? Maharaj, I am denotes the inner, there is the outer. Both are based on the same sense of being. All right, so they're both based on the same I am, the same sense of being. But those things that we know well, he says in another area, those things that we know fully, we place within ourselves, and those things we know partially, we place outside of ourselves. But they are all of the same nature. They are all because of the same I am. So even though there's an apparent difference, it is not an inherent difference. It is not true. Is it the same as the experience of existence? Maharaj, to exist means to be something, a thing, a feeling, a thought, an idea. All existence is particular. Only being is universal, in the sense that every being is compatible with every other being. Existences clash, but being never clashes. Existence means becoming, change, birth, death, and birth again, while in being there is silent peace. All right, so he's existing and being. So being doesn't require anything. It's the isness of the universe. It's the moment, this moment. And it's always the same regardless of what it contains, what seems to be happening within it. It's always actually, if you slice it or catch it, there's no change in the moment. The moment is always as it is. And there's no past to compare to it, no future to derive from it. It simply is. It is each individual still frame in a movie. So in a movie, there is no change, right? Every moment of the movie is still. There's no movement in it. And so every moment of our life is the same. It's the unchangeable absolute, the experience of isness. But it's through egoism, through attachment to a body to change, which provides us with time, space, causation, past, present, future, all the tools of the mind, to then observe God and use those tools to create a universe, to create a sense of not being, but a sense of existence. I exist, right? And so our being becomes particularized into an existence, and that existence includes all of the sensations that happen when you break up God into 1,000 million different things. So to exist means to be something, a thing, a feeling, a thought, an idea. All existence is particular. Only being is universal, in the sense that every being is compatible with every other being. And why is that? Because being happens before egoism. Egoism is when being grabs the particular and begins to exist, and then has a whole slew of attractions and aversions. And so a room full of egos is always a room full of trouble. No, no exception. Get a room full of egos, there's going to be trouble. But if you could get a room full of beings, enlightened souls, there's no desire and no aversions. So there's no trouble. So the sense that those beings are fully compatible, but those existences not always compatible. Existences clash, being never clashes. Existence means becoming, change, birth, death, and birth again, while in being there is silent peace. So that is enlightenment, to have that sense of being, but not particularized. You're there, and there's no inhibition caused by egoism. And so the expression of your nature is spontaneous and fresh in the moment. You always act out of love, which is why enlightened beings can't make a wrong move, why they're perfect. They don't make mistakes because there is no egoism. There is no wrong seeing. There's only response, spontaneous and new, from a pure nature, a nature of an unconditioned love, a nature full of grace, a nature of wisdom, all playing through existence in being. Okay. If I create the world, why have I made it bad? Maharaj, everyone lives in his own world. Not all worlds are equally good or bad. What determines the difference? Maharaj, the mind that projects the world, colors it in its own way. When you meet a man, he is a stranger. When you marry him, he becomes your own self. When you quarrel, he becomes your enemy. It's your mind's attitude that determines what he is to you. So it's your mind's attitude that determines what everything is to you. And you color that mind, you train that mind in what it thinks is good or bad by all of the offerings that you put on the shrine of yourself. All of the news you put in your ears, all of the novels you read with your eyes, all of the cooking you smell with your nose, all of the things you touch with your body, all of these things are constantly coloring your mind and giving it a slant, a bias through which it observes the moment, the present moment. And so it's that lens of bias from karma, really, that determines our particular ignorance, our flavor of ignorance, our flavor of delusion. And so not all worlds are the same. You know, some of Swami Prabhupada will remind us of that story about the two men who couldn't walk, who were in wheelchairs. Both of them suffered injuries and became paralyzed and were confined to wheelchairs. To one of them, he grew in great bitterness because of all the things he was no longer able to do. And he focused on that and saw that, and it was always a loss and a suffering to him to not be able to walk. So he grows old and grows bitter and angry. The other man takes it as a challenge, sees that he has lost his legs, but now he must express himself without legs. So he goes and becomes a competitor and joins the Special Olympics and becomes a champion, a gold medalist, and goes around and becomes a motivational speaker for everybody else that has lost their legs and teaches them how to make it an advantage and not a disadvantage. And so those two worlds were initiated by the same action, losing the ability to walk. In one of that worlds, it becomes a wonderful advantage and a blessing to millions. In the other world, it becomes one man's despair and loneliness. And so you can see your mind creates your world. If you are worshiping, if you are offering the good things to the Lord that dwells in the temple of your body, if you're reading responsible news, if you're watching responsible things, if you're reading good, healthy words, good scriptures, good commentaries, good poetry, good art, that cultivates a healthy mind. If you are watching things that make you angry, that disempower you, that excite your senses, titillate your longings, then you live a life of frustration and a life of busyness and a constant anxiety about needing change, needing more, needing different. And so this is why we practice, to become aware of the prayer of our life, meaning becoming aware of what we offer on the shrine of our body to this I am, which dwells within. Right? So we begin to watch our karmas, and we watch the things that we do, realizing that in this moment we're creating our tomorrow. Right? And so if we make wise decisions in the moment, we'll have a wonderful tomorrow. If we don't make wise decisions, we make tomorrow more difficult for us. And so this is why we practice, is to become aware. And what do we become aware of? Our nature. By becoming aware of our nature, we learn to know what creates a fulfilling life and what doesn't, what creates a calm mind and what doesn't. We begin to learn about ourselves, about this I am. And in the beginning, we call it learning about the will of God. But in the end, we understand that it was a matter of expressing our own divine will by getting out of the way, by reducing our sense of particular and returning to our nature of being as opposed to existing. So it's the mind that projects the world and colors it in its own way. When you meet a man, he is a stranger. When you marry him, he becomes your own self. When you quarrel, he becomes your enemy. It is your mind's attitude that determines what he is to you. Questioner: I can see that my world is subjective. Does it make it also illusory? It is illusory as long as it is subjective, and to that extent only. Reality lies in objectivity, right? So that's why Thakur was not content with saying this world is just an illusion. He says there is something there, but what you think is there is the illusion. You know, this world is God. It's not what it appears to be. It's not what your mind has made it. And so that is the illusion. The illusory is how you've interpreted the world. But the world, that which is manifesting as world, there is a reality behind it. There is something there.
What is the meaning, Maharaj, of reality lies in objectivity?
Objectivity means having no particular perspective of it. You know, it's seen as it is. There's no interpretation. There's no projection. There's none of your. It's seen without karma, seen without samskara, seen without anything causing any kind of prism effect.
Without putting the mind up front.
Right. Well, seeing it in pure mind, seeing in a mind that has no disturbance is objectivity.
So no opinions or no.
Right.
No,
there would be nothing own an
subjective opinions of him. So.
Right, because it's all seen as one's own. And the perfection as it is also recognized. In subjectivity, we ruin our ability to accept everything that is, because everything's good or bad, right or wrong, comfortable, uncomfortable, hot or cold. So through our egoism, we lose the ability to see the perfection of the moment. We judge it according to body, mind, and all the other influences of our accumulated thinking.
But when we are practicing, we still have to, like we are saying, we have to discern between the good and the bad, you know, whether if you're taking in what kind of news, or like we just talked about, or what kind of people you associate with.
You discern. Yeah, you discern. You know, you notice the effects of things. And if you stay objective, things will fall away that are not helpful, and things will collect that are helpful. But if you're not discerning, if you're not aware at all the time, then habits will creep in unnoticed that will create things that are unhelpful based on previous patterns. So discerning is not so much a matter of changing it. It's a matter of becoming aware, noting it, seeing it clearly. Look, I did that, and it caused me to get up late in the morning. And getting up late in the morning caused me to have more meditation. So just seeing that from an objective perspective is enough to eliminate it. But because of our long-lived patterns, we've got attachments. We can't get it to let go. We're shaking our hand, you know, and that hot piece of grease is still sitting there burning. It won't come off. Like, like that. But discerning is just developing inner awareness, a constant light of awareness within. And noticing that light of awareness itself will fix things. You don't need an egoistic determination to make it change. You're trying to completely eliminate the ego sense. So, and that way change can actually happen. Because ego may determine that a change is needed, but then there's another component of ego which will prevent that change from happening. because our vices are built into our idea of who we are, that same ego. And so the ego will work for and against itself simultaneously. That's bondage. That's confusion. that's why this game is really silly, because we're both filling our boat with water and bailing the water out at the same time, because we're not praying a consistent prayer, because we've gotten lost without awareness. We've lost our rudder, as a sense.
Okay.
What does objectivity mean? You said the world is subjective, and now you talk of objectivity. Is not everything subjective? Everything is subjective, but the real is objective. Now, how can he get away with doing that? That's a very Vedantic koan right there. Everything is subjective. The real is objective. So you see, the real is not a thing. So he can say everything is subjective. If you've got an object, you've got subjectivity, because only ignorance can create an object, right? So everything is subjective means you, as an experiencer, as an embodied soul, you have your favorite ignorance du jour, your glasses named ignorance du jour that you look through at the world. And so everything will be subjective to you. Your experience of everything will be subjective, because it has to go through your filter of samskaras and karmas. But what you're actually experiencing, what you're actually feeding into your filter, that is objective. That's not defined. That has no judgment or adjective, no characteristic to it as such, until it meets you, until it gets fed into a particular part of your brain and gets interpreted into a particular symbol for something. Then it's purely subjective. So everything is subjective, but the real is objective. Oh, in what sense, Maharaj? It does not depend on memories and expectations, desires and fears, likes and dislikes. All of this is seen as it is. Yes, just what we were discussing there. That your ego contains all of these machinations that turn an objective singularity of love, existence, and wisdom into tables and chairs and skies and earths and hot and cold and likes and dislikes, all based on the perspective of what it looks like from a body, from a mind that was born into a country at a time. So like that. So all of those things get applied to our perspective. And thus, every world, every one of us has our own world. And each one of those worlds is subjective, colored by the offerings we have given to the owner, to the indweller of the temple of the body. How's that, to mix it all together? So to be objective means to not depend on memories or expectations, desires and fears, likes and dislikes. All is seen as it is. Everything is seen in the moment, free of past, free of future, just is. And see, if you take away past and future, you take away judgment, you take away value in many, many respects. Being has no plus or minus. It's perfect. It's contentment. It's stillness. Is that what you call the fourth state, Turiya? Maharaj, oh, call it as you like. It is solid, steady, changeless, beginningless, and endless, ever new, ever fresh. How is it reached? Desirelessness and fearlessness will take you there. What's another way of saying desirelessness and fearlessness? Absolute non-resistance to the moment. when it's taking that. Do you remember when I saw Arapasananda when his mother was in danger of passing away in the hospital, and every time I saw him that day walking around the campus in Hollywood, his lips were moving. And so at lunch, I guess it was in the waiting for lunch line, I asked him, I said, Maharaj, you've been talking to yourself all day. What are you saying? He says, oh God. He says, my mother's in the hospital. He said, it just, so much anxiety around that. I've just been going around repeating to myself, God is everywhere present and always perfect all day long today, just to remind myself God is everywhere present and always perfect. And so to live life desireless and fearless is to recognize God everywhere present and always perfect. To recognize the moment as perfect is to accept the moment without any resistance. So whatever the moment brings, you receive happily as a guest, entertain it in its moment, and let it go to accept the new guest. And so it's a continual flow, solid, steady, changeless, beginningless, and endless, ever new, ever fresh. So this is where words begin to get shaky, because you've got changeless, you've got beginningless, and endless, which is part of changeless, but then you've got ever new, ever fresh, which would seem like it would be change, but it's not. It's the same thing presented, but your mind applies change. Your mind shines memory on it, which makes it look like it's changing, right? So, but it's like, again, like that single frame in a movie. If you catch any moment of the movie, you can grab a frame, and there's no change in that frame. That frame is always what it is, right? So in the moment, there is no change. But when the mind is shown the first one and then shown the second one, the mind now has created a sense of past, and it uses that sense of past to interpret the moment, which now looks different to the mind, looks like it's changed to the mind. And so the mind applies its memory to that, and suddenly you have movement, right? Because the mind has to create a narrative between the snapshot it saw before and the snapshot of what it sees as the current moment. And it sees difference, so it's going to see change, and then it's going to create a narrative, which is going to mean movement. It's going to create movement where there is none. And so this is how the mind works. It's constantly, God is being presented to it through the five senses into the mind. If you just let that flow happen with no blockage, no snapshot, just acceptance, then you never see change. You see God everywhere present and always perfect. The harmony remains. But if you snapshot it, which is what ego does. Ego creates a limit. It creates a particular. So it takes a snapshot of moment, and then it takes another snapshot. It says, oh my God, these are different. Why are they different? And that's Maya. Your explanation of how one moment came out of the previous moment is your own personal Maya, your own personal delusion about what you are and what God is and what this experience is. So desirelessness and fearlessness are not practices, they are results. They are results of finding your inner shrine, finding that place within you of the absolute unchanging.
Can I ask something? So you accept everything, also earthquakes and wars and horrible things like Gaza, yeah. Except if you are there in the midst of it, then you just accept everything and you see God everywhere.
Yes, but don't forget that your nature, the nature of that which is accepting everything, is Satchitananda. So it sees everything and it responds with love, responds with intelligence. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't just see it and be like, there it is. Oh, look at those people over there suffering, dying. God is everywhere present, always perfect. And you just walk by self-satisfied and happy that God is everywhere. You wouldn't do that because your nature is divine love, and so you would see it, you would accept it. This is the reality, but you would respond to it by alleviating suffering. You would respond to it in love, right? Not react, because react would be a reaction to a way that you think it should be. But responding means just coming from a nature, coming from what you are. And so, yes, we accept it as it is. We don't push against what it is. We don't look for answers and demand changes. We respond to isness with our own isness, an isness of pure love, an isness of pure intelligence in our being. And so we don't...
Yeah, we don't judge Putin or somebody else. We don't judge.
Right. We always respond. We don't react. We don't take in a set of sensations and then react to those sensations. We always see the moment as it is and just continue to manifest. Just continue to let God come through the gate, come through the heart, come through this life, so that you and the divine are not separate. And there's no interim will in there from egoism, from smallness, right? Because the moment, like I say, the kind of secret to it, it sounds like a little bit like a cop-out because it's so hard to see. But we judge everything from the perspective of a body or a mind, depending which part of it we're inhabiting at the moment, And so if it's freezing cold outside, we think, oh my God, we need to turn the heat on. That's not good. It needs to be changed. We don't accept the moment as perfect. There's resistance because we're identified as a body. And so the body determines good and bad, right and wrong in the moment. And then if you're identified with mind, an aspect of mind, it will do the same thing. Because it's not that the moment is always perfect to the body, and it's not that the moment is always perfect to the mind. It's that that the world is always perfect. It's just perfect, not to anything, because there is no to anything there, right? But if you, so like that, just kind of riffing on it to see what else comes up in there. Because this is a fundamental truth that can change everything if we get hold of it, if we can accept it.
So, but where does the teaching of the war of the Bhagavad Gita in terms of fighting, where does that fit in then? I mean, the action taken, with the offering of it to the Lord, the action, could be there. I mean, it's not total acceptance.
Well, there's acceptance, but because remember what Krishna tells Arjuna, and Arjuna's like, I'm not going to fight. And he says, you're not going to be able to not fight.
Right.
This is what is. This is what is. It's not yours to stop it or change it. It's yours to respond from your nature. All these people are already dead. This war has already happened.
Right. I guess the confusion, is the acceptance could be in the form of action as well. Yeah.
Oh, definitely.
Right.
Oh, yeah. Yes. Oh,
sometimes you feel acceptance is no action, like you just accept. You're like, you kind of.
No. It's no action from the perspective of egoism. There's no reaction to a condition. Mm-hmm. There's always just a steady expression of your divine nature. Regardless of circumstance and condition, you will respond with love, with wisdom through your being. You won't, your reaction doesn't change on circumstance. That's what we're talking about. So you have action. Acceptance can be action, but it won't be action toward a particular problem. It'll be the action of expression of your divine nature in this set of conditions and circumstances. Right? So the action is not provoked by a condition or a circumstance. It is inspired by a sense of being in a set of circumstances and conditions, but undefined by the circumstances and conditions, right? So that's, we see that like in Thakur, when somebody had passed away and he sat there and didn't moan or didn't weep and didn't say anything, but was steady. And then when it was time to respond, that's when he stood up and banged his forearms and says, "Death is standing at your door. Devotees, stand up, gird your loins with truth and righteousness. Know your scriptures, gives them a real charge." That's responding from nature and not reacting to a circumstance, weeping and getting sad, and all of that's reacting to a circumstance. But responding from nature sometimes looks very different from that. It's kind of the magic of these holy men and women, that they're not caught up in things, but are always somehow able to say the right thing, are able to somehow do the right thing in the moment.
But no reaction would be the correct reaction anyway. It's
right, because reaction and responding are two different things.
Yeah.
Reaction is when you consider the conditions and circumstances and come up with a plan of action, an egoist, a way to improve the situation or to make the situation perfect. It's not a seeing of the moment as perfect. Responding is seeing the moment as perfect, meaning it is what it is. There's no good or bad in it. It is what it is. And responding means you have a nature that's putting off body heat. You have a nature that alleviates suffering, that feels compassion, that cares. And so it responds to all circumstances the same way, with love and wisdom and being. It doesn't look at the circumstances and then make a plan to alleviate something or to fix something or to make something better. It's all about simply being what you are.
And all the governments and everyone is obsessed with incorrect reactions. That's all they do.
Yeah, all of us are, which is why it's so much fun. Everybody's reacting to circumstances that are different for every single one of them, with different interests and different ideas of good and bad and different desires, different aversions. And so we come up with the chaos, which is this world, this delightful world. That oddly enough, we love so dearly. We love to hate so dearly. All right. Section 20. The supreme is beyond all, which is how it's able to be objective when everything is subjective. The supreme is beyond all. Questioner, you say reality is one. Oneness, unity, is the attribute of the person. Is then reality a person? And the universe has its body? Maharaj, whatever you may say will be both true and false. Words do not reach beyond the mind. Okay, so when we're talking about things that are not mind and are not bodies, is very clear. Everything you can say about it, is going to be, well, that's true. Or you could look at it that way, or yes, that is a perspective, because every single one of our lives is a perspective on God, because that's what we are and that's all there is. So every one of our lives is a perspective on God, but every one of our lives are radically different from many of our other lives, the lives going on around us. So this reality is one. But if we're going to try that, to understand that one, right, we've talked about that, the mind can't understand oneness without a second. You can't conceive of that. That can't be calculated in the mind. The mind will create a symbol for it, but once it's created a symbol, it's no longer true, because symbols are not one without a second, right? So the mind is not going to be able to consider what one without a second is. That's why we can't talk about God. That's why we can't give a name to God, because God is one without a second. You see, the mind needs those three components, right? I say this probably way too much, but the mind requires subject, object, and relationship between those two in order to conceive of something. So if something doesn't come to you in a triad, the mind can't do anything with it. So if you hand the mind, which already we've broken it, if you hand the mind one without a second, the mind can't clean it up. The mind can't figure it out because it needs those three components even to conceive of it. It has to create a symbol in order to do it. And that's what objects are. Objects are symbols of sensory input, right? Objects are not things in of themselves. They're simply symbols of sensory input created by mind. And that's why we all live in our own world, because we're all creating our own set of symbols for our sensory input and formulating a world. So, well, whatever you say will be both true and false. Words do not reach beyond the mind. Questioner, I'm just trying to understand. You are telling us of the person, the self, and the supreme. Vyakti, vyakta, avyakta. The light of pure awareness, prajna, focused as I am in the self, jivatma, as consciousness, chetana, illumines the mind, antakarana. Now we know why he's asking names for everything. Illumines the mind, antakarana, and as life, prana, vitalizes the body, deha. All this is fine as far as the words go. But when it comes to distinguishing in myself the person from the self and the self from the supreme, I get mixed up. Maharaj, this is a very important piece, very short sentence coming here. Get ready, though. This sentence has got it all. The person is never the subject. That is what makes this so extremely difficult for us, is because the person is never the subject, right? We cannot make an object of our own awareness, because our awareness is the container of all objects. So the person is never the subject. You can see a person, but you are not the person. You are always the supreme, which appears at a given point of time, space as the witness, a bridge between pure awareness of the supreme and the manifold consciousness of the person. Right, so that is the thing. You are, we've talked about this, it's amazing when you think about this. What a phenomena, what an incredible happening. You are actually a portal between the absolute unmanifest isness and the changing manifest, the changing world. You are that which contains both God, Brahman, and Shakti, the changing vibration. And within you, in that shrine of the heart that we talk about, that temple of peace within you, that is the portal. That is the piece of rice paper, the rice paper screen that stands between the absolute unchanging and the power of God, the world of change, Shakti. So Shiva and Shakti, you are the container of both. And within you lies the portal between, which is your enlightened identity when you still have a body. That in between. And a pure mind just allows the vibration of that rice paper divider between God as the absolute unchanging, the noun of love, the noun of intelligence, the noun of existence, God the noun, through that paper, we'll just say it vibrates, and coming out this side in the vibration is the world, your world that you've created. And so you have that space within. This is the profound part of being human, of being both. We are that capital T and that little t, depending on where our understanding of ourselves, where we place our identity in this concept of being. Where we place our idea of what we are determines the nature of the world we create. Right? And so Yes.
The part about the rice paper, could you go over one more time?
Goodness. Yes, now understand all of this is metaphor, okay? that within you, you have Shiva and Shakti. You have God unmanifest, absolute, unchanging, the center of the universe. And you have that which is constantly changing, always new and fresh, right? The power of God. So, right, you've got the fire and its power to burn, milk and its whiteness, and we contain both of those within us. And both are within us, although the quiet part, the unmanifest, is not visible. because it's the one without a second, right? This, I start chuckling because you really can't talk at this level. You can't say anything at this level. It's when Thakur says, he tells that story about when he came down to earth, and the first thing it says that he crossed a wall in the indivisible. He crossed over the wall in the indivisible. And on this side of the wall, he said he saw the 7 rishis, one of which was Vivekananda. And he goes and tells Vivekananda, I'm going down. And the shooting star drops down. And then a few minutes after, Vivekananda's shooting star drops down behind him. Anyway, so there's a wall in the undivided. You see the irony of that? That's what we're trying to deal with. So this wall in the undivided at this moment, I'm positing, is a piece of rice paper divider that's in the shrine of your heart that separates fire, the absolute unchanging divine, and its power, Shakti, the world of the changing. And that, to have a pure mind is to not have anything changing the vibration, the imagined vibration of this white rice paper piece, so that which manifests directly from the unchanging absolute, the power of God, the whiteness of milk, can manifest unblocked by you, by an ego self that puts itself in between the process and starts metering what comes out of that rice paper divider, as it were. I'm making this metaphor up on the spot. I hope I'm not just making you feel completely and utterly confused. But you see, that all I'm saying is that you contain both Shiva and Shakti within you. Both are manifest within you, and that in the shrine of the heart, in that place of stillness beyond mind, the two are there. The two are together. And that's where Thakur says you can see that the roof and the stairs are made of the same material. You see the oneness of milk and its whiteness, fire and its power to burn. They're no longer distinguished as two at that place. But there'll always be a slight one, as long as there's a division in there, as long as there's a vibrating piece of paper and a you, then there's some egoism, some amount. You can't have a body without an ego. It just pops like a bubble, goes away. Is that any clearer, or should I go on and continue to scroll?
No, Maharaj, I have to think about it.
Yeah.
Listen to this again.
Yeah, you know what? But don't really think about it, because you can't get this stuff in the mind. Listen to it and just let it wash through the mind, and let it become aware of the residue it leaves behind in the mind, which is just an idea that points to something that can't be an idea. Right? You won't be able to understand this, so don't try and understand it. Just let it wash through the mind and let the residue remain. That's what Swami Prabhupada used to tell me.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Yeah. He was talking at that time about how to read mythology. He said, don't read mythology about and wonder the whole time, did this really happen? Could that person really exist? How could they possibly have done that? They couldn't have had airplanes. They don't have airplanes. He says, when you read mythology, don't think like that. He said, read it, let it be what it is. And when you're finished, enjoy the residue of what the story left behind. He says, that's how you read scripture. Right? So read the scripture. They're not the scriptures are not there to tell you what God is, according to Tattva, because nobody can say what God is. So the scriptures are not there for that. They're not there for you to put into your mind and understand God. Won't happen. Tattva says the scriptures exist solely to tell you what God is not, so that that which is obvious can become apparent to you. How's that for a marvelous statement? The scriptures are there solely to tell you what God is not, so that that which is obvious can become apparent to you. You see, so what God is self-manifesting. It's not something you can learn. And so you're trying to shut down the noise of your ignorance enough so that that which is obvious, that which is the truth, the isness of things, can become apparent, can manifest through you. So as you read these scriptures, it's not trying to understand them. It's trying just absorbing them, you know, and letting the awareness produce its own purity for its manifestation. Something like that. All right. But don't think as we read these things, especially in Jnana Yoga, that you're going to understand something by the end. Because it's not an understanding that we're after. It's a realization. Two different things. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So the person is never the subject. You can see a person, but you are not the person. This is a fun exercise. I started doing this 3 days ago, and it's I don't know if it has any value yet. I'll have to get back to you on that. But certainly it's been interesting. I've been looking in the mirror, trying to look into my eyes, right? Because how to grab all of this. Looking into my eyes, trying to look into the eyes of the person in the mirror at the same time that I'm trying to see the gaze of the person not in the mirror, right? Because it's interesting, when you're looking in the mirror, what are you looking at? You don't know what you're looking at because there's only one face, right? And that's this. That in the mirror is a reflection of a face. But I can only see one face, interestingly enough. So I've been playing with that in order to make it a conscious feeling of moving my attention from outside to inside and trying to practice so that I can keep both awarenesses going simultaneously. So that in the mirror, I've been staring at the person behind the eyes in the reflection while trying to maintain the real world experience of my own isness as I'm looking into what presumably my own eyes in the mirror, and trying to feel that switch that happens when awareness pays attention to what's in the mirror, and then awareness comes back to what's being looked at behind the eyes in the mirror, the sense of self. So you get that feeling, that steady, you get an understanding of what it means to switch your awareness from the outside world to the inside world. Distinctly different feeling. A distinctly different feeling. When you're paying attention to the mirror, it feels one way. When you become aware of what you're trying to see in the mirror, what's behind the eyes of the face in the mirror, when you try and align that with that in you which is looking for itself in the eyes of the reflection in the mirror, that is, to me, it seems important because that's the encapsulation of your whole day. If you can be aware of that in you, which you're trying to see in the mirror behind the eyes, if you can become aware of those two at the same time, that's some really good discernment. And that will help you to make it through the day without getting caught out here, without getting caught in the mirror, right? So that you can stay seated in here, behind the eyes, but know that that's what you're seeing in the mirror of the mind, the world. And so I was just doing it in the mirror just to get to become aware of that feeling of when the attention switches from inside to outside and then back from outside to inside, just trying to become aware of that feeling and of that change so that I can become aware of it when it happens in the day. When I move my attention outside, I can have that click go bing, and then I can purposely move it back inside. So I keep myself in the shrine all the time so that I don't get kidnapped unawares. The kidnapping is going to happen, but if you're aware, then you can do something about it. You can bring it back again. If you're not aware of being kidnapped, well, then you're just at the mercy of your senses. You're just caught. So,
Maharaj is also like similar to to try and be centered while you conduct your daily affairs.
That's
so
it. That's
part of your attention is there, but the outside, the inside attention is more potent than the outside. So the outside is more of a skimming, and just enough to make it practical, versus the inside is what you clasp onto.
exactly. The inside is real. The outside is not. And so it's keeping that emphasis established so that you remain in the real, but you can keep observing the unreal without getting caught up. It's the way we've talked about that is when you walk down a busy street. If you can feel the difference, and that was what I was trying to practice in the mirror. When you go outside of yourself and then you're kind of pulled into the shop, into the store windows, pulled into the sale signs, pulled into the activities and actions of everyone around you, pulled into all this stuff, and it's just a constant. Then there's a lot of juggling going on in the mind and a lot of all kinds of stuff going on. And at the end of the day, you're exhausted. But to a practitioner, to a spiritual person, they stay on the inside. They stay established in the silence of the heart. They're enjoying the presence, the unchanging, that steady pulse of this divine love. And they're, from that perspective, observing the world, but never getting pulled into a narrative, never getting pulled into a thing. So you walk down the street calmly. There's a movie, I can't remember the name of the guy who wrote it, but it was called Kionoskatsky. I think it was something weird like that. Anyway, one of the scenes, it was a movie with no dialogue. It was just a series of images with spiritual intent. But one of the images was Tokyo, radically busy, shoulder to shoulder people, cars, honking, bustling on the sidewalks. And there was a monk in Garowa walking down the street, super slow, put one foot down very mindfully, and then lining his heel up with the toe of his previous foot down one, and just walking toe to heel very slowly in this mass of pushing, shoving, crowded business people in Tokyo going from place to place. And they start to zoom up, and you can always see that monk. You can't see any other particular in the crowd because it's just all this sea of change. But you can always see that monk, and it just keeps pulling up and pulling up and pulling up. It goes way out into space, and it's wonderful because you get way out in space, and you can still in your mind's eye know that monk is still visible at some resolution in that crowd, can be found and seen. And, I think to move in the world while established in the heart looks like that. That monk is just another person moving on the planet, but the way he moves, the focus with which he acts, and the clarity in which he exists makes him different from everything around him, around her. Everything is different. And so that is a fruit of our practice, is to be established in that calmness of heart, never forgetting the presence of divine love, never forgetting to respond and not react, and not to be pulled out of our center to imagine ourselves as a body-mind, but to remain the witness, content and unchanged by circumstance, so that we respond and not react. So that's kind of the whole of it that he's putting here. And it's 10:05. So, which is good because now the writer is understanding that he's not a person. So